is brought to you by Head Start Basketball.
We got 3 pillars. It's gratitude, unity, and preparation. And the guys last year, they added a 4th was purpose. So those are our 4 pillars. That's something that we harp on every day.
Dominic Parker is entering his 2nd season as the men's basketball head coach at Rochester Institute of Technology. He took over the Tigers program after 1 season as the assistant head coach at Christopher Newport University, where he had previously coached 2 seasons from 2017 to 2019. Parker spent 1 year as an assistant coach at the University of Maryland Eastern Shore after leaving Christopher Newport in 2019. Next, he was an assistant coach at Guilford College in Greensboro, North Carolina, from 2020 to 2022. He originally came to CNU following 2 seasons assisting the Shenandoah University men's basketball program. He began his coaching career at Virginia State as a graduate assistant in the 2012-2013 season, and later assisted the program at Richard Bland College from 2013 to 2015. Hey, Hoopheads! Train smarter and win more this upcoming season with the #1 selling shooting machine in America, Dr. Dish. This month, grab a certified pre-owned machine for as low as $3,995. You'll get a 3-year warranty, 250-plus drills, and quick 3 to 5 day shipping from Minnesota. Inventory moves fast, so don't miss out on these savings from our partners and friends at Dr. Dish Basketball. Learn more at drdishbasketball.com and follow their incredible content at Dr. Dish B-Ball on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. Mention the Hoopheads podcast and save an extra $300 on the Dr. Dish Rebel, All-Star, and CT models. Those are some great deals, Hoopheads. Get your Dr. Dish shooting machine today.
This is Kip Ione, founder of Teams of Men, and you're listening to the Hoopheads podcast.
Coaches, you've got a game plan for your team, but do you have one for your money? That's where Wealth for Coaches comes in. Each week, we'll deliver simple, no-fluff financial tips made just for coaches. Whether you're getting paid for camps, training sessions, or a full season, Wealth for Coaches helps you track it, save it, and grow it. It's time to stop guessing and start building. Subscribe now at wealthforcoaches.beehive.com/subscribe and follow us on Twitter at Wealth for Coaches for daily money wins. Your money needs a coach. Start with Wealth for Coaches. Grab pen and paper before you listen to this episode with Dominic Parker, head men's basketball coach at Rochester Institute of Technology. Hello and welcome to the Hoopheads podcast. It's Mike Klinzing here without my co-host Jason Sunkel tonight, but I am pleased to welcome back to the Hoopheads pod Dom Parker, head men's basketball coach at Rochester Institute of Technology. Dom, welcome back, my man.
Thanks for having me, man. I'm looking forward to this.
Excited to have you back. Since we last talked, got a new job, got a year under your belt. And when we last had a conversation with Dom, he was at Christopher Newport, and now obviously takes over a program as the head coach for the first time. So we're going to dive into all that, but we're going to work our way backwards to when you first become aware of the opening at RIT and your thought process. Obviously, you're in your first year there back at Christopher Newport for your 2nd stint. So I don't know how actively you were seeking head coaching jobs at the time, but just kind of walk us through the timeline of how you become aware of the opening and then what your steps were to try to pursue it.
Yeah. So it was unique. One thing for me, it was pretty crazy. At CNU, we went to the Elite Eight, and we played Guilford College was the team that I was coaching before I left CNU. So that was unique in itself. But what happened was once the season ended, I got a phone call from a search firm. It was a representative from Parker. And he, just reached out to me and said, hey, there's an opening at a high academic school. Would you have any interest? He didn't say the name of the school. I guess he was just trying to, see people that may have been interested. So I said, sure, talking with, Coach K at CNU, he told me, he said, I think it's, it's time for, you to try to get some D3 head jobs and put your name in the hat. And, so that pretty much happened. And crazy thing about it, that same night, one of my mentors, another guy I worked for, Rob Pryor, he called me and said, man, would you have any interest in RIT? And I said, yeah. It was different for me now too, because when I was at Christopher Newport, I just got married to my wife, and she was also pregnant at the time. So it was a lot going on. But so I did my research. The unique thing about the job at RIT, there's a kid that I recruited years ago when I was at Guilford, who that's how I found out about RIT. When I was I was the assistant coach at Guilford. There was a kid who actually played for me this past year. It's full circle moment, but his name was Brock Bowman. And he called me and said to tell me that he was going to go to RIT. So that was my first understanding of RIT. And that was 4 or 5 years ago. And it's crazy how it was a full circle moment, just recruiting a kid and then actually being able to coach him. But so basically, RIT, I saw at that time, big institution, really good academics, engineering, STEM type stuff, majors, computer science was their thing. So I knew about RIT. So it was pretty unique how this process happened. So what happened when I told the research firm that I was interested, he called me back this next day and said, okay, he kind of filled me out. He asked some questions. He said, why do you think you'll be a good fit? You haven't been a head coach before. Why do you think you're ready now? Just kind of gaining, some interest. And I'm sure he probably did that with several other guys as well. So, that was kind of the first introduction of it. And then probably about a week later, I got a phone call from the AD. Jackie Nicholson, she called me. He said, hey, can I schedule a time for us to talk on the phone? Schedule it for like the next day. And I talked to her for about 25, 30 minutes. Just, talked about the job. I got to introduce myself and, who I am and what I could bring to the program and the school. And, it was a lengthy process. So then probably another week and a half went by again. And, she called me and said, hey, would you be interested in doing a Zoom? And I said, of course. So I went through the Zoom process. It was a committee. They had Brock, a player, was on the committee. Was the intramural director, assistant athletic director. It's probably 7-8 people on the committee. Everybody asked a question. And, I sold myself as best as possible. And then that was it. I didn't hear from them for probably another 2 weeks. So at the time, my wife was, 9 months pregnant. Like we was about to have a kid. So I was kind of scared. I'm like, man, what if they call me and, she goes into labor? Like it's our first child. So I didn't want to miss that. So it worked out. The timing was great. So I didn't hear from them for about probably another week and a half, 2 weeks. By that time, my wife went into labor and my daughter was born on May 1st. 2 days later, I get a phone call from my AD, Jackie Nicholson, and she said, hey, I was want to let you know, did you want to come on campus for an on-campus interview? And I'm like, yeah, sure. So luckily my wife has, several sisters. So they came up because, newly mom for my wife. And so I flew up to Rochester and did the on-campus interview. I think I flew up on a Thursday night. Interview was on a Friday. And it was all day long. I met with so many different people. I met with the vice president. I met with the president. I met with, everybody in the athletic department. And the one thing I will say about the process, it was I did my research. Like most interviews, you do your research, you understand what the school is. But actually seeing it and walking around this place, I was like, wow, this place is unreal. And to me, I was just like, this could be a gold mine. You got 20,000 kids on campus. You're top 100 academically. We have a big student population, which kids a lot love. And for me, I just saw the opportunity and fell in love with it. So I thought I had a great interview, went home, didn't think much of it. I was in a great spot. I was, assistant head coach at CNU. We just came off the Elite Eight run. We had our, All-American coming back. So I told myself, hey, worst case scenario, we're going to try to win the whole thing the next year. And, it was crazy. Me and my wife was driving. Jackie calls me and, I'm like, I pulled the car over. I'm thinking like, oh man, here we go. She go tell me I didn't get it. And she said, hey, look, I want to offer you the job. Immediately my wife was ecstatic. We had a 2-week-old baby. She didn't know what was going on, but it was awesome. It was awesome. She offered me the job. My wife was like, take it, take it, take it. I said, give me some time. I think I called her back. Probably like an hour and said, yeah, I want to do it. And then the rest was history. So we had to move I was married for a year, new 2-week-old baby, and having to move from Newport News, Virginia, all the way up to Rochester. So that's kind of how the story worked with the search firm. It was unique with that too. Just that was my first time ever dealing with a search firm, but it actually was pretty cool. Getting in and see kind of what they do.
When you think about just the conversations that you had with your wife and going through that process with her while she's 9 months pregnant and about to deliver you guys' first baby, how difficult was it to have the conversation where you see her and look, I've had a wife who's been 9 months pregnant 3 times, so I know what those conversations are like and what the focuses of them can be. So how difficult was it to kind of have a realistic conversation about, it's a pretty big move, right? I mean, you're going from an assistant coach to a head coach. You're moving, as you said, quite a distance. It's not just, hey, I'm going to take a new job. There's a whole bunch of things that go along with it in terms of the responsibility and everything. So how'd you manage to have those conversations despite the fact that, hey, your wife's about to deliver a baby?
One thing about it, me and my wife was a coach too. She was a junior college coach while I was the coaching at Christopher Newport. She was the head coach at Virginia Peninsula Community College. So she understands the coaching profession. She knows what she signed up for. And honestly, I couldn't be with anybody else because she understands the landscape and how things work. So in the back of her mind, she knew that, this is a chance that could happen. And honestly, I've interviewed for 9 different jobs. And I think for the last 6, I was with her. So like she would get real excited. And, I used to kind of feel bad. I'm like, I shouldn't have told her, I wouldn't get a job. And, she would plan like, we're going to move here, do this. So actually getting this job and actually like having to plan and move, it was exciting. We was been married for a year. So, we was off going to upstate New York, moving, 13 hours from home? We're from North Carolina. So we was 3 hours from home in Newport News. So it was exciting. But it was also kind of scary in a sense because we're going up to a place, don't have any family, but one thing about it, she understood what I'm trying to do. And she's a trooper. I mean, I wouldn't be where I am without her. So she's been along with me the last 3 jobs, and she loves it. She loves it. She really does.
Somebody who understands what it's all about makes those conversations clearly much, much easier. And then, as you said, if you've been through that process a couple times and you've been excited about, hey, maybe if we get this and life's going to go a different direction, and then it stays the same. And now finally you get to make that pivot and have that transition and get that excitement. I can see where, again, you combine the new job, the new baby, the whole thing, moving across the country, and man, all of a sudden life gets a lot more exciting. So in the interview process, uh, the standard question would be, well, what kind of things did they ask you? But I always like to flip that around and go, what kind of things did you want to know from them? So when you went into that interview, what did you want to know about what RIT was all about that was important to you to make sure that not only was it a job that, hey, they might want you, but is this a job that I can come into and have success? And you mentioned a couple of things already, right, in terms of the size and the academics and that kind of thing. But what questions did you have for them to help you to better understand the job and whether or not it was a good fit for you?
Yeah, one thing that what I've learned, because like I said, I've probably been through, I think 9 processes, so the big question I always ask is, what's the perception of this team on campus? And honestly, that question gives you a lot of different answers, in terms of like what they're looking for. At the time, the team wasn't really involved on campus with stuff. it was just in a different place. So for me, what it showed me, like, okay, they need somebody to come in here with some new ideas. My AD, she wants to win. So I've come from winning, Final Four at Christopher Newport. The year I got the job here, we went to the Elite Eight. I've won a national championship and at Peter, at Richard Bland College. So I know I had a winning resume. And what I really wanted to figure out is, could you win at RIT? And once I asked the questions and saw the place, I think you can. I think this place is a gold mine. And, I think we're going in the right direction in terms of what we're doing and how we're doing things. So for me, it was really just asking, can you be successful here? But then also, too, on the flip side, I'm looking at all the coaches at the school, and the baseball coach has been here 30 plus years. The men's soccer coach been here 25 years. The women's soccer coach has been here for 25 years. So it's just like, wow, people are going here and having long careers. It's just like, it has to be something good. And that being here for a year, I mean, I get it. I mean, Rochester's a unique city to live in. It's just nice, and it's a great place to raise a family. You have good school systems, and you're like 4 or 5 hours from a lot of different places, which is, being a coach, me driving ain't nothing. So, it's a unique deal in terms of that, but it's a great institution. And I think it's growing even more. Like, it's so much. We just got a new president, and some of the things that he's trying to implement is going to just make this place even better. And I can't wait.
The first person you called besides your wife when you got the job?
The first person I called was my dad. He's my dad's like my hero. So like, I run everything by him, and I told him, I said, Dad, I got the job. He said, you got to go. He said, you got to go. That's a good opportunity. So I called my dad, and then I think the next person I called was Coach K. Just to let him know, like, hey, Coach, I got the job. And he told me the same thing. He said, Dom, man, this is a good opportunity. And honestly, at the time, the assistant at Christopher Newport now, Quentin Akery, he's a young star. And to be honest with you, I think I was stunting his growth staying there, to be honest with you. Like, he's really good. So I think it worked out for everybody. Coach Q, that's what we call him. He got bumped up to my spot. He's doing a great job. And for me, it was my time to run my own program. So I just saw it was a great fit for me, for my family, and then also too, just my AD is awesome. She's trying to bring change here, and a unique thing about it that I'm the first minority head coach ever at the school. So that was another thing that really appealed to me. Just being able to get an opportunity like this, and something I really want to do well, and years after me, hopefully somebody else like me can have a chance to get this position as well. So that kind of fused me to do well. So
Absolutely. So clearly, you've gone through the process to interview for other head coaching jobs. So, and I know you and I talked about this the last time that you were on, in terms of preparing for those interviews, preparing for the opportunity to be a head coach, and kind of thinking about, hey, if I eventually get my own program, what do I want that to look like? But before you get the job, it's more theoretical, right? It's like, okay, I don't know what school I'm going to be at. I don't know exactly what it's going to look like. These are the ideas that I have. Now, all of a sudden, boom, you got a job. You have a specific job at a specific school that has a specific set of characteristics. So after you get the job and you spend the next couple days looking through and thinking about, okay, what am I going to do? What is this going to look like? How am I going to start to build the program? What were some of those initial thoughts that you had in the first week or so about what you wanted to do and how you wanted to go about getting yourself off on the right foot to build the kind of program that you want to have at Rochester?
yeah, the first thing I did when I got the job was I reached out to all the current players. They were an older team, and with COVID, I knew a lot of those guys had a fifth year. So the first thing I did was I had a real conversation, and I said, hey, look, this is who I am. This is what I'm trying to do. And every last one of those guys was like, Coach, I love what you're saying. Like, I'm willing to come back. there was one guy who decided not to come back. And to be totally honest with you, he had a 6-figure job offer on the table. And I said, man, look, I can't promise you that I can get you something like that afterwards. So you might need to go take that. And he's doing well. He actually came back for alumni weekend, and he's doing great. But the first thing I did was I wanted to re-recruit the guys that we had, because, being at the time, it was, it was like it was the end of May, so a lot of guys were committed. So I knew that, like, if I could keep some of these guys, maybe that could help us. And they came off a 14-win season. They had a great season, had two guys all conference. And like I said, the kid Brock Bowen, who was on the committee, had another year. So, he was the first person I called, and he said, Coach, I'm in. Like, you're the guy. I know you. We had a prior relationship. So that's the first thing I did was that. And then the next thing I did was guys that I recruited that was available. I wanted to kind of recruit somebody that fit RIT. A lot of guys didn't fit. A lot of guys just, too far from home. The academics, they didn't want the majors that we had. So I was fortunate enough to bring in one guy my first year. And I called all my coaching buddies, and they kind of, I leaned on them for, any names, any guys you think would fit. So we brought in one guy who was a freshman this past year, who was solid. Danny was pretty good. So that was really the big thing, was really trying to keep the guys that I currently had. And then the next thing was just trying to meet administration, trying to figure out what's the best way to attack this thing, in terms of, I called admissions, because I wanted to learn, okay, what does that look like? What is the profile? What kind of grades do they have to have? What kind of packaging do we do? So that was the next phase, was just really learning what's the best kid for RIT. And then lastly, just talking to current coaches at the school. Like I said, there was a lot of coaches who've had longevity there. So, there's no need to reinvent the wheel. Like, talk to people who's been there and had some success. So that was the 3 things that I really focused on when I got the job.
What were some of the things that the returning guys said to you in terms of, hey, here's what we liked about where we were at, maybe some things that, hey, here's what we can do differently, or here's where some areas we need to work on? Did you try to get that kind of stuff from them about, hey, here's what we like about where the program is, here's maybe some things that we'd like to do differently that can take us to that next level? Did the conversation go in that direction at all?
Yeah, some guys talked about kind of what I wanted to do. The 2 things that I'm real big on, we're going to defend and rebound. And they liked that, because they felt like, they didn't really have an identity. They felt like they were good players. And like I said, they won 14 games the year before, won a game in the conference tournament, lost to Hobart, who won the league. Like, they had a good team. And I think they just, they wanted somebody, I think honestly just wanted somebody that was a little bit closer in their age. And then also too, just bringing some new ideas, like, I know people look at social media with plays and different things of that nature. So, just, I talked to them about that stuff, and, we all fit. It was a good fit for that. I think it was just time for somebody new to come in and with some new ideas. And I think they all kind of enjoyed the conversations we had.
As you got into that first month, 6 weeks of the job, going from an assistant coach to a head coach, right? All of a sudden, there's a lot more things on your plate that maybe aren't directly basketball coaching related. So, what were some of those things that came at you in the first month, 6 weeks of the job, that I don't want to say that you weren't expecting, but just things that you had to take care of that maybe as an assistant coach, you knew they were there, but they weren't on your plate? So how did you adapt and adjust to that?
Yeah, I think the one big thing is, as an assistant, you do different fundraisers and stuff, team camps, golf outings, but being a head coach, just, a part of my job is to try to raise money. So when I got the job, like I said, I met with the current players and things of that nature. But after that, I start meeting with alums and boosters, people who could help the program. And once like the vision that I was trying to give to them was basically like, look, this is, I wanted to introduce myself to them and just say, this is me. This is what I'm trying to do. And like anything, you need people behind you. So I wanted to try to get as much support as I could. And a lot of people that was, that wanted to kind of, get and help the program. So that was another thing that was a little different, for me, just being an assistant. You don't do a ton of that. You do some of that, but not, I do all of that now, So to be totally honest with you, like when I got the job, the first month I didn't do no basketball stuff. Like no basketball. Like I ain't look at a play, nothing. It was all just, fundraising, meeting with donors, admissions people. Like I did no basketball stuff. And then lastly, like, the recruiting, I knew I had 9 seniors. So I knew that like this 2025 class, we have to have a home run because it's, we got to replace a lot. We got to replace the whole team pretty much. So I hit the ground running too. Once that first month, kind of all that stuff went the way I went recruiting.
So from a recruiting standpoint, when you change areas of the country, you got a whole bunch of contacts, right? In the area of the country where you're from, where you're working before. Now suddenly you go to an area of the country where you haven't been. You got to rebuild those contacts. You got to rebuild that trust. You got to let people know who you are, what you're all about. How do you do that? What's that like? Is that just being present, being in places, showing up, and just having as many conversations and talking to as many people as you can? Is it as simple as that?
Yeah, I think for me, the unique thing about RIT is we can recruit nationally. And that was a big thing that I sold in my interview with that. If I was the head coach there, we're going to recruit all across the country. So that's what I did. So of course I leaned on Virginia, North Carolina, places that I'm from and where I've been for a while, but also too, like I coached Division I and I did a lot of recruiting in Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania is, 4 hours from us. So I really leaned on that. And also too, I worked a lot of camps, a lot of high academic camps. One thing about a place like RIT is we have a niche. So like everybody can't get into Harvard or Yale. So we can get kids who may not get into their dream school for that, but we can give you a similar education. So I just hit the ground running. And honestly, I mean, for probably the June and July, like I was not home. I wasn't home at all. Like I was on the road. I was living out my suitcase, like, but I knew that we had 9 seniors and I knew I had to hit a home run with this recruiting class because it's going to be key. It's kind of the rebuild.
As you're doing that, now we got to go back and talk to you about your family, right? Your wife, your new baby, you're moving, you're getting that thing settled, and now you got to get on the road and you got to recruit. So what was just the move? What was that like? Moving, just getting your family settled.
Yeah, so honestly, it was a tough decision that I had to make, but what we decided to do is, like I said, we're from North Carolina. So my wife went to North Carolina pretty much for the summer. And, I was recruiting in North Carolina, so I would go home and, I was see my daughter, see my wife. But pretty much they stayed in North Carolina. And for me, we just thought that was going to be beneficial. My wife was a new mom, she could lean on her mom and her sisters. And, my lives in the same area. So I could really hit the ground running. And to be totally honest with you, that was a game changer for me. It really was. We got a really good recruiting class this class, and a big part was because I saw these guys live and I got the chance to have real conversations with them, get them on campus, and really hit the ground running. And I thank my wife all the time for that because I mean, like I said, it was a lot of people might not have done that. I might didn't go to as many events as I could, but the fact that we did that, it really helped us.
When did you start sitting down with the film of the team from the year before, looking both collectively at what they did and then individually looking at what your guys were capable of doing from a skill position standpoint, and then figuring out, hey, I know that this is the style of play. You talked about rebounding and defense and basing your philosophy around that. But when you obviously eventually you're going to be able to recruit and get guys in that fit the style of play that you want to play, the guys you inherit don't necessarily fit directly into that. So how did you start thinking about, hey, how are we going to play in our first year. What did that process look like for you in terms of going through the film and evaluating there? And then once you get guys on campus, you get back into your practices and just how did it go? What you thought it was going to look like versus what it ended up looking like?
One thing I knew watching the film is I had some guys that could really score. I brought back off the 4 top leading scorers, 2 guys were all league. And I mean, they, like I said, they won 14 games, which is pretty impressive. That's the most they've won in a while. So I knew that we were very skilled offensively. Just watching film, I knew like the defense and the rebounding was going to be something that I had to emphasize daily because just watching the film, that's just not how they was wired. A lot of them guys was wired to score. Like some guys, it's just, I'm going to go score. So I knew that was going to be something that those guys had to kind of figure out. And I knew that was going to be our hurdle, and to be totally honest with you, just, looking at it now, it's something that we struggled at this past season. We gave up 80 points a game, which isn't great, but we could score. We scored 75 a game. I think it was like tied for first in the Liberty League. So, we would have practices. We would have 5-minute scrimmages, and I mean, we're scoring 30 points in 5 minutes. I'm like, wow, is that because we can score, or is our defense, But at the end of the day, I mean, I had guys that was bought in, and we lost. I think I looked at it today. We probably lost six games by 5 or less. It could have went either way, get a stop here, get a stop there. So, one thing that I'm glad that I did is I stuck with what I want to do, and the one thing I would say that doing that, I had a bunch of sophomores and freshmen, just my first year, and like, they understand what I'm trying to do. And like, I think for them, it's like, okay, we know what coach is about, and, of course you want to win. You're like, but this year, we only won 7 games. But one thing I would say, it was so beneficial because my young guys who are now upperclassmen kind of went through the fire a little bit. So like they kind of got something to prove now, because when they win 14 games, a lot of those guys were freshmen and they didn't play a lot. They played a little bit this past year. So it created kind of like, okay, like we gonna be better. So I got some motivated returners, which I'm so happy about.
What were the conversations like in your head as you're going through the season and you're not winning as much as maybe you would have liked, right? So you have this idea of want to play this way, want to be a great defensive team, want to pound the glass, but our team's kind of wired to be more of an offensive team. As you said, the ability to stick with your convictions, even when the scoreboard tells you that you're not winning games. And if you could take the scoreboard down, there's no problem, right? You just keep going with what you're doing and you're on the right track. But unfortunately, people outside the program they're looking at the scoreboard. So what were the conversations like in your own head as you're going through the season in terms of, hey, I know we're doing the right thing. It may not be demonstrated every night on the scoreboard, but I know we're moving things in the right direction. How'd you have those conversations, and what were the signs that you saw that you were going in the right direction?
Yeah, I think it was honestly, when I really think about it, is I've had some really good mentors. I work for Coach K, who's a Hall of Famer in my book, Coach Tom Palumbo, and they've always told me is go with your gut, right? I could have easily, we could have played zone and we probably would have won more games. But at the end of the day, I want to create a culture of we're going to defend and rebound. So like for me, it's just like, you know what? Maybe this just isn't our year, but I'm going to stick with what I want to do. And maybe the young guys can understand it. And then they can kind of articulate it to the new guys coming in. Hey, look, this is what we're all about. So I'm so glad I did that. And in all honesty, it was pretty much like after probably the 4th or 5th game, because I was like, man, like we're not defending like I might want to. but at the end of the day, I said, you know what? We kind of morphed some stuff a little bit. We played faster just to try to create some more possessions. I'm not, of course, like I said, we're coaches and we want to win. I come from winning, but at the same time, I think about Coach K, like Coach Krzyzewski. I mean, his first 3 seasons at Duke was, subpar. I look at Jay Wright, similar, they wasn't like what they are. And those 2 guys are in the Hall of Fame, so good things take time. That's something my dad always told me. He always said Rome won't built in a day, and I think this year I really wanted to lay a good foundation and be a tough team. And I think we accomplished that.
What was the most fun or enjoyable part of being a head coach rather than being an assistant? Was it planning a practice out exactly the way you wanted it? Was it the in-game decision making? Was it just being on the floor with your guys and being the main voice that they heard? Just what was the piece of being a head coach that you enjoyed the most compared to just your role as an assistant?
I think really as a head coach, just having your imprint, on kind of your program and running stuff. And, it's so many things that I would I would tell when I was assistant, hey, we should do this, we should do that. Like I'm actually doing it, I'm actually thinking. And also too, I'm doing like, what, that didn't go as planned. Like that wasn't as good as I thought, So it's really kind of trial and error. And I could say this year, and I'm fortunate, and I had, I got 2 really good assistants, Coach Mick, he's phenomenal, and Coach T, who was from Hampton. They're both phenomenal. So I had 2 guys with me that they trust the vision, and it was all a learning experience for all of us, because beforehand, like we all never worked together. So, I'm learning them, they're learning me. So that was another factor too. But like, it's funny that we're talking now. So we actually had a staff meeting tonight. And to be honest with you, like my wife texted me and told me I need to come home, but if I probably would still be there talking to them, so, these guys are super excited about what we got going on and the guys we got coming in. And like I said, last year was a learning experience and, for everybody, and I mean, we're in a good spot now.
Think it back to your preparation for becoming a head coach and just the ideas that you had, the way that you hoped that things would go. What's something that over the course of last season went pretty close to the way you envisioned it when you imagined getting a head coaching job?
I think the one thing that went well is I'm real big on player development. And I can honestly say that's something that we do every day. I can honestly say that the guys on my team got better. And for me, that was validation to like, okay, like I know what I'm doing. Like I can get guys better. Everybody speaks it and says, hey, I can get players better. But like, I look at the stuff that we're doing and then like my young guys as the season progressed, they got more confident. They had some, we didn't win, but they had some good games. I saw there's some bright spots. And I think that's something that they build on the summer. We talked to those guys over the summertime. They continue to work, and I'm just super, super pumped to see kind of how these returners we have, how they develop. So I think the player development piece is something that I think every program needs it. Everybody, they think differently about it. But I think one thing about me, and I said this in the interview process, is I don't need better plays in March. I need better players. And I think getting your players better every day, I think is something that that's the changes from wins to losses, having good players. So
What does that look like on a day-to-day basis? When you say player development, in your mind, what does that look like? How individualized does it get? Because when I think of player development, I think of somebody who's taken the time to evaluate a player's game, look at what they already do, doubling down on their strengths, figuring out a way to maybe turn something that's a weakness into something that maybe not as a strength, but something that they can sort of work to eliminate that weakness. But to me, player development is always player specific. So just talk to me a little bit about how you think of player development and what that looks like day to day in practice for you and your team.
yeah, so Coach Mick, he's 6'10", so he works with the big guys. And Coach T, he works with the guards. So one thing that we're big on is being able to read the game, and also to being able to get to spots where you're going to get in the game and shoot from those areas. One thing about it is, people, you'll shoot a ton of shots, but it's like you're shooting a ton of corner threes, but you don't shoot corner threes. So one thing that we're real big on is we're big on getting shots in the flow of our offense. And there's this one kid on my team named Zach. He was a sophomore last year, and we stuck with it. No, he started out, it was tough in the beginning, but then as the season progressed and his confidence in his game flourished. I mean, he had a game this season. He had scored 27 points. I think it might be the third or fourth highest point total in our conference. This is a kid who wasn't playing a ton, but he stuck with the player development and he really trusts the process. And I'm looking forward to see Zach as a junior. I think he's gonna be a good player for us. So just guys like him, just seeing like the work that he put in and then his confidence. The one thing about it, I played for Coach Kevin Billerman. He's the head coach at Ravenscroft, and he made me feel like I was the best player ever. He probably made me feel like I was better than I actually was. So that's one thing that I'm real big on is giving my players confidence. And I'm gonna be tough on them. I'm gonna be a truth teller, but also too, I'm gonna put life into them and speak them up and make them feel like they can do whatever they want, and also to be the best player they can, and just like I said, just put. I'm real big in my faith. It says in the power in the tongue, like you got to speak it into existence. So, if I'm always, you're such a bad player, like you're gonna be a bad player. So I try to be positive, and my assistants look at me crazy sometimes. They're like, "How could you be positive in this moment?" But I'm like, man, positive, like it's the universe. Like if you put out positive energy, like you'll get it back, and guys will start feeling that. If you're negative all the time, they're not gonna want to be around you. So I try to remain positive at all times.
How do you build that player development into your practices? When you're putting together a practice plan, is player development always at the beginning? Is it always at the end? Do you weave it in throughout the team stuff during practice? Just where do you fit that in on a daily basis?
One thing about it, just the different programs I've been in, that's a great question because some people do it at the end of practice, some people do it in the beginning. In my opinion, I think you got to do it kind of after you stretch. You might do some team stuff. I think you do it right after that because you got them. You got your guys. But every team's different, So the team that we had last year is I noticed the first 20 minutes of practice, like after that 20 minutes, like you could get them going, So like for us, we would stretch for 10 minutes. We'll do something for like another 10, and then we're getting to player development. We do guards and big breakdown. We do, 3-on-0 stuff. Like we would do stuff like that because guys are like feeling good. That's the time, you ain't do sprints yet, so you're still kind of somewhat fresh. So I think that was a sweet spot for last year.
Yeah, it makes sense, right? You want to be able to get it in a moment where you got their attention. Clearly, player development is something that players enjoy because it helps them to get better. And as you said, it helps to build their confidence. So I think that's a big piece, right, of having a successful team is having your team be confident, not only in themselves, but also in the teammates. And that transfers over to the coaching staff, right? They got to believe in you and what you're doing and that you're there to get them better. And if they know that you can do that, it just kind of all ends up feeding on itself to some degree. So I see exactly where you're coming from with that one. Let me ask you the reverse of the last question. When you thought about the process of being a head coach, when you thought about running a program, you told me about something that went kind of almost as you envisioned. Is there anything that was a lot different from what you envisioned? Maybe not something that you did wrong necessarily, but just something that you thought it was going to be one way, ended up maybe being a little bit different than what you thought prior to becoming a head coach?
Yeah, I think, the one big thing that I thought would be a little different was really creating an atmosphere of like it takes time to build like a culture. I was blessed to be at places that the culture was already in a good spot, and not saying the culture was in a bad spot. It wasn't at all, but it wasn't strong at the time, so like one thing about it is that was something that was like, whoa, like we need to do a lot more, leadership stuff, a lot more team bonding stuff, and it was unique because I had 9 seniors who were 5th-year seniors. So like these guys are, they're going to the bar, they're doing stuff. And I had these young guys who are just, on campus, just kind of trying to figure it out. It was very tough to try to get those older guys and those young guys to kind of mesh, because it's just, they're in two different parts of their life. The seniors are trying to figure out what's next. The freshmen are like trying to figure out like, what are we eating tonight? You know what I mean? So
right.
it's
Yeah.
just trying to mesh them. That was tough. That was probably one of the toughest things about last year, is just because everybody has a different walk and, during different times in their journey. So trying to get them to come together for a common goal, that was very challenging.
When you think about how to do that, so not even looking at last year, but heading into this season, what are some things that you have in mind heading into your second year from a culture standpoint that you think is going to help to bridge that gap? Now, obviously, as you said, you had a bunch of guys graduate that now are no longer part of the program, the active program, I should say. But what do you have in place? What do you have in mind for building culture here in year two?
Yeah. So one thing about it, and that started in the recruitment process, so one thing about it is that the 8 guys that I have coming in, I will call them, like, we'll play Friday, Saturday. I will call them Sunday and just tell them, like, hey, this is where we're at. It was like they was kind of already on the team without being on the team yet. So they was kind of understanding like what we were going through. So now, full circle moment, now that they're here now, like a lot of them feel like they was like in those locker rooms because I had those conversations with them, and they kind of know what, where we kind of struggled at and where we need to get better at. And those guys have basically come together with our returners to like, all right, okay, like, all right, we're on the same page. And it's funny because, a lot of these guys, they're playing pickup right now. And then a lot of them call me afterwards just to, check in and stuff. And they just said, Coach, like, these returners, like, they came to us with like open arms. Like they make us feel like we've been here. And I think like I said, the returners from last year saw that like we have to buy into each other. And the sooner we can do that, the sooner we can start winning games. So it's a different aura on campus. Like everybody's talking about it. And we got some different personalities. We got some guys that I'm probably gonna have to be like, hey, look, man, you need to go to class. We're gonna have to we got some guys that's go, they gonna challenge some people, but it's just different. It's a different day and age, and also it's a different type of kid. And I think me and my staff done a good job of seeing the guys we need and attacking those guys and getting those guys to come here and have them understand, and not just them, but also their families, kind of where we see them fit and where we want to go. And the one thing I will say about my 8 guys is like, they all are coming here because they see my vision for RIT. If you talk to any of those guys, they always say like we're going to make RIT special. Like that's their goal. It's not, I'm going to come here and I'm going to be a 1,000-point scorer. All 8 of them are like, we're trying to put this place on the map. So I think that was something we did in the recruiting process, and something that we're going to reiterate all season long, that, we can't go anywhere if we're not on the same page.
How do you plan to use your 8 days of outside of the regular practice schedule? Are you going to put all 8 of those days ahead of the season? Do you save 1 or 2 for after the season for maybe going through some player development stuff with guys, or what's your philosophy with those 8 extra days that you get?
Yeah, I mean, my philosophy is to use the 8 days beforehand just to get a head start. Especially now, I got 8 new guys, so just trying to bridge the gap with them. I think we're actually going to do some different things defensively too. So just trying to get that in place. And I think I know some people kind of wait to use them, but honestly, for the way I think you should use all 8 beforehand, because God forbid, what if 7 of those guys transfer? You gonna save them for what?
Right.
So
Yeah.
I think using them beforehand is something that is what I'm going to continue to do. I think it's the best way.
As a head coach, do you put together a I don't know if curriculum is the right word, plan for, hey, I want to try to have X, Y, and Z in by practice number 6, or my goal is to have all this stuff in by the second week of practice? Do you go through and do you break it down by time frames like that, or are you more like, hey, this is day one, what we need to do. I know where we need to get to, and then we go day by day based on what we accomplished the previous day. Just what's your thought on the pacing of how you get stuff in practice?
I think everything is based off your guys. I think for me, I'm not going to move forward if my guys don't feel comfortable about it. And just working with Coach Palumbo at Guilford, he's a firm believer. And honestly, I should have probably took his advice sooner. He was just like, he always would tell me, he's like, you can't be good at everything. You got to find 2, maybe 3 things that you're going to be elite at. And you're going to have to emphasize that daily. Because we're not like Division I, we can practice all summer long. And, it's just a different day and age. So for me, it's just like really emphasizing, hey, look, like, we're going to be really good on this. We're going to hang our hat on this. And if it takes us all 8 practices, fine. That's how it is. So I think you got to kind of see where you want to hang your hat on and then just really emphasize that. That's what I'm doing in year 2. But like the question you asked, I mean, I try to be like, all right, I got to have this press break in. But at the end of the day, it's just like, I'm trying to do stuff and it's like, you know what, this league don't even press like that, So it's like I'm doing all this stuff to try to meet a time frame, but it's not even, it's not even like that. So, and I think another thing too is the Liberty League, seeing it on film is different than actually being in the league. This league is a beast. Like these coaches in this league are high level. So that's something that I didn't, you can't really put an account for, watching film, but like the adjustments that these guys make, we play Friday and Saturday. So like, you don't have a practice in between time. So just being in this league this first year really opened my eyes to like, we're going to do some different things this upcoming year, just because I think that'll help our team. And like I said, this league is high level. I know the Ithaca coach just got the NYU job. It's some rumblings that some other stuff is going to happen in our league too. So I mean, these coaches are really good. So that's something that film don't really show you. You see an adjustment and like so that's something too that I had to learn.
How'd you handle that Friday, Saturday back to back with no practice in between and trying to prepare for, in essence, what you're doing, right? Is you're preparing for mostly that Friday night game. You got some prep for the Saturday game too that's got to be mixed in there. But how'd you find a rhythm to that over the course of that first season?
Yeah, I mean, for me, we wasn't in a place where we could overlook Friday's game. So it was all hands on deck for Friday. And I'm fortunate enough to have really good assistants that one of them would kind of pretty much take the Saturday scout. And if it's something that was unique, that we would have to do in practice that week, I wouldn't tell the guys that we're going through a zone. Some of them kind of put it together like, okay, we might face a zone this week, So I think for me, that was challenging. That's a tough part of our league. And that's kind of what I'm hinting at too. Just a lot of teams in our league, they'll go zone based on out of bounds. And I'm like, why is everybody going zone? But I get it because it's like they're going zone because they don't want to have to go over all this stuff, this man-to-man stuff. They're just going to go zone and just kind of deal with what happens, So, little stuff like that is you don't necessarily see that until you kind of get in the league about why some of these coaches do some of the things that they do. But there's not much time that you play at 7 and then you play the next day at 4. It's not much you can do. And you're staying at a hotel most of the time. So, but it's fun though. It's fun. And honestly, I tell my guys, I mean, if you want to play in the NCAA tournament, that's how it is in the NCAA tournament. You play Friday night and you play Saturday night. So it's just gearing us up for that.
What's the game day schedule look like on Saturday for your players? Forget about you, but what does it look like for the players?
Yeah, so for us, if we're playing on the road, we usually wake up and get breakfast. And then also after breakfast, the guys probably go back to the rooms and then we'll have like a walkthrough at the hotel. And, the walkthrough might also consist of watching a little film, personnel film. If they have a set that's pretty unique that we need to walk over through the hotel, we'll do that. And then we usually kind of get pregame meal delivered, or, one of the coaches go get on the bus and bring it in. And then by that time, guys go to their rooms, they rest. and then we, we're travel partners with our women's team, so we'll go watch our girls play. They play at 2, and then we'll play at 4. So we'll support them, and then we get ready for our games. That's pretty much kind of how it is. The same thing for home games. Home games, we might be able to go, get a shoot around just because, we're at home, sleep in our own beds and stuff like that. But for the most part, breakfast, walk through, pregame meal, game.
What about for you? Do you have something that has to be a part of your routine? I wouldn't call it a superstition, but do you have something that has to be a part of what you do to prepare yourself mentally and physically for a game?
Yeah, I mean, I like to work out. So, I like to try to get a workout on game day if I can. It just kind of gets the stress level down. I can kind of just, and also too watching some film. One thing about it, it's always something you can see, so it's like, okay, we might can attack him a little better. So, just watching film, working out, and honestly, she doesn't know it, but my daughter, she looks at me and smile all the time, and no matter game, win, loss. So just spending some
Yep.
time with her has also been pretty good too. Just she takes it something she don't know what's going on. So hanging out with her is another cool little thing too, because she's at the end of the day, win or lose, I'm still dad, and she's still yelling at me. So um so yeah.
Yeah, nothing better than relaxing and having your kid not worried about whether you won or lost a game. You're just dad. What about post game? How quickly after a post game? Now, clearly on a Friday night, I don't know how much you get to, but just how do you get to? How fast do you get to the film after a game? Are you letting it sit and getting a good night's sleep and then waking up in the morning, getting back to it? What's your post game routine look like?
Yeah. So the post game routine. So we play on Friday, and then what I normally do if we have a bus trip and we got to drive to the hotel, it's maybe an hour. Whoever scout it is excuse me, from my staff, we will kind of talk over the bus, like, what are you thinking? And they already kind of have the scout laid out. They already got clips made. Do we need to guard this guy a certain way? Is there anything unique that we need to do? We'll talk about it on the bus. And then once we get to the hotel, we get the guys, situated, let them go to their rooms, give them water. And then me and my other coaches will get together and kind of, we'll talk it out. We'll kind of talk out the game. And, I tell them to shut it down, but I don't. I kind of watch stuff. It's been plenty of times this season. I woke up and my computer's dead, and I'm like, oh wow, it's like 4 a.m. I fell asleep. So I probably need to do something different. But I think that's something that just trying to get up to speed. Just because you've been focused so much on this Friday game, and then now you just got to flip the switch, win or lose. You got to flip the switch to try to win another one. So it's unique. It's tough. It's that's one of the toughest things about our league. It's just these back-to-back games, but it's fun. It's fun.
Yeah, the good thing is everybody's in the same boat, right? You just, I'm
Yep.
sure coaches that have been in the league, right? You figure out your routine, you get it. You'll probably be much better at it in year 2 than you were in year 1, just in terms of getting a feel for what you and your staff needs, and then also what your players need to be able to be at their best. We talked a little bit earlier about some of the non-basketball slash administrative stuff that you had to do in the off season. What are some of the things that somebody who's maybe an assistant coach at the college level who hasn't been a head coach, what are some of the administrative things that you have to take care of and handle either yourself or things that you have to delegate during the season that are non-basketball tasks that again maybe somebody wouldn't be aware of?
Yeah, I know here at RIT, we have a couple initiatives to kind of raise money. One's called Getting the Game. So, just trying to make creative ideas to like reach out to our alumni or some of our donors on some of the stuff we're doing. Our athletic director, she does a good job of making some initiative with that stuff. But that's something too that I think is a lot of people don't talk about. But being able to raise money has value, especially now in NIL era. So being able to raise money, and also too just for me, I really wanted to get involved with the community. So, my team does a lot. We've done Special Olympics. We do a lot of different things like that. So just being visible, that's something that in the interviewing process that they wasn't really visible in the community. So being able to kind of make this place hosting camps, setting stuff up like this. That's something that we've done here this past year. I've had shooting camp, which was a hit. We've had a team camp. We've had elite camps. So just trying to put the imprint all over this community, and just trying to get the word out, the brand. Like RIT is a brand. Like my sister, she was in grad school at Harvard, and I'm on the Metro, and I'm like, I see a big RIT billboard. I'm like, oh wow, So the coach from Tufts, Brandon, he sent me a picture a couple months ago. It's like, man, y'all all over the place, So like, we have a brand, and just trying to get it out there so people can, we can get the best players that we can.
Yeah, clearly the more name recognition that you have and the more people are aware of what you're doing, both from a school and a basketball program standpoint, the easier it is to be able to have that initial conversation with the kid that you're trying to recruit. And they're like, oh yeah, I know Rochester Institute of Technology. I'm well aware of what they're all about. And clearly that's an advantage than having to go in and just explain, hey, here's who we are, here's where we're at, here's what our program is. If people are more aware of it, gives you a little bit more recognition and ability to go in there and have those conversations with recruits. And clearly, as you well know, getting the right players into your program, like you talked about how important this first recruiting class is for you, and just the quality of the guys that you were able to bring in, both in terms of their basketball and just who they are to build the kind of culture that you're talking about. So I already asked you about the culture heading into year two. And obviously at the Division III level, you haven't been able to be with your guys and do some of the things, as you said, that they can do at the Division I level. But where are you from a standpoint of your own preparation for getting your team ready to look like more of what you want them to look like in year two from a basketball perspective, and your preparation as a coach to get them into that position?
Yes. So we have something called a captain's practice. So basically, like, I got 10 returners who've been through it, so they kind of lead workouts, and just for what they tell me, they're doing the stuff that we would do in practice. And to be honest with you, that's awesome, because the teams that I've been a part of that was successful, like, it was player led. It wasn't, coach led. It was player led. So the fact that those returners are taking that initiative, he's probably going to be one of my captains. He came in today. He just moved in. He's a returner. He said, Coach, he said, man, we're going to be good. Like, you're speaking it into existence. And, like I said, it's just a different aura. Like I said, my returners, they got something to prove. And like I said, we won 7 games in year one. But at the same time, I'm glad we did, because now I got guys who are hungry. And then now I got 8 incoming guys who are like, okay, we're going to put this place on the map. So you got returners who are hungry, and then you got guys who, think like, all right, like we're going to show people that, we can be a national program. So putting those guys together, and then of course you're going to have to fix certain things, but like their mindset, I think is where it needs to be, which I think is perfect.
You talked a little bit earlier about leadership, right? And then what you just talked about, a captain's practice being led by guys who are a part of the program. In Division III, so important, right, in the offseason to be able to have guys who are holding other guys accountable and trying to get guys together to be able to play and do some of the things, and make sure that everybody's working towards being prepared when practice starts in the fall. So how do you go about, in your mind, developing those kinds of leaders up and down your roster? What are some things that you do to give kids an opportunity to demonstrate leadership so that you can develop those guys into the types of leaders you need to create the program that you want?
Yes. One thing about RIT is we have a lot of different programs with leadership. So all my freshmen will be in it. We've had several guys that were in it last year, and it just teaches you how to be a leader, but not just like a vocal leader. Like there's different types of leaders that we talk about. You can be a guy that leads by example. You can be a guy who can be a truth teller. You could be a guy who's kind of a rah-rah guy. He talks a lot. Like, so we talk about, the different type of leaders, and that everybody is different, and everybody, it's not just one leader that's like, all right, this is how we're going to go by, but everybody's different, and everybody leads by different things. So we harp on that a lot. I know my returners, we talked about, at the end of the season, we talked about how we kind of lacked leadership, and it wasn't their fault. Like I had 9 seniors who were basically looking at life after school. They knew they're not going to the NBA, and they were probably a little ready for that. So like our returners basically they said, Coach, like we got to work on our leadership. And I said, well, that's something that y'all got to figure it out. And one thing I will say is that they've done a great job this summer with, hey, look, you need to get your papers in. You got to do this. You got to do that. I'm like, okay, like these guys have, it's just it's a different aura, which I think is good.
Yeah, to be able to have guys that'll take that initiative on their own, I think that's always a big part of what it means to be a leader, right? That it doesn't always have to come from you saying to somebody, hey, go do this, or hey, you take care of that. It's them making sure that those things that need to get done are getting done. And when you have that, as you said, player-led teams are going to be more successful than coach-led teams. You got to have those players be able to take ownership and do those types of things in order for you to be able to have the kind of success that you want. So another question heading into year 2, as you look at what you're going to need to be successful, and you can define success, whether that's win-loss on the scoreboard or whether that's just reaching some of the internal goals and milestones that you're setting for your team in your mind. When you get through this next season and you look and you're trying to evaluate what it looks like compared to where you sit today, evaluating last season, what are some of the things that you're going to look for over the next 6 months? They're going to define whether or not year 2 is a successful season.
I think the big thing that I'm going to look at is just playing a good brand of basketball, winning basketball, and one thing about it, you're not going to win every game. We might, I don't know. But if we don't, I want to put a good group of guys on the floor who are playing winning basketball. And I think you do that and you get them to buy into each other. You get, we've added some toughness and some athleticism. And I think it'll work itself out, and sometimes you got to go through some things. And last year we went through a lot. And I think my returners can talk to the new guys about what we went through and how they don't want that to happen and how we all got to be on the same page. So I know that's something that these guys, I overheard some of them talking today, just like, look, like we're on a mission. I heard someone say we're on a mission. So, like, I think it's slowly kind of, it's, what my assistant coaches and I are trying to kind of, give these guys to just show them like, hey, look, like good things can happen here. Like I have a transfer and he said, Coach, I can get in the gym now. I said, yeah. I can go see the trainer now. I said, yeah. He said, we got a gun and I said, yeah. He was just like, there's no reason why we shouldn't be good. You know what I mean? Like, so like, I think we have the resources and I'm serious. I didn't make that up. Like, I'm so serious. The kid he was just like in awe. Like, I can get in the gym right now. I said, yeah. He said, like, my old school, I couldn't do that. I'm like, yeah, man. Like, I can go see the strength. I can work out with a strength coach. I said, yeah. He said, oh my God, like he's like, these freshmen don't know how good they have it. So having guys with different experiences and they can articulate it to my freshmen to know like, this ain't how every place is, So I think that's one thing too that we really harped on is diversity. We really wanted to bring guys with diverse backgrounds and different things like that because we got 3 pillars. Is gratitude, unity, and preparation. And and the guys last year they added a 4th was purpose. So those are our 4 pillars. So that's something that we kind of harp on every day. And for me, it's just like the kid, he was expressing gratitude. It's like he was just so thankful to be able to just shoot something that you take for granted, just getting shots up. A lot of places you can do that. But like he was at a place that he couldn't do that. He had to like either go real early or real late. It's middle of the day. He was just like, I can go get shots up at 2:00. I said, yeah, man. Like he just was just in awe. So, guys like that, and that's the last thing I would say about the recruiting piece is like, we got good character guys. Like we have guys who are world-class people and they're going to be successful long after the basketball court. These guys on my team are going to be CEOs, presidents. They're going to be really successful. And that's one thing too, is we really wanted to recruit high character guys that were tough and that come from winning, so that's the 3 things that we really wanted to harp into.
So when your roster is made up of guys who are coming back, who are hungry, want to have success. You got new guys coming in who clearly are motivated, want to get after it. Everybody's moving to that. Everybody's moving in the same direction, right? Everybody wants to build a program that's going to be successful. And yet you got a big roster. And there are some guys inevitably who aren't going to get as much opportunity to play in games. But coming into fall practice, how do you think about giving every guy on your roster an opportunity to demonstrate where they stand on the practice floor? How do you do that with a roster as big as what most Division III schools have? So you got a roster of around 20 probably. How do you get all those guys an opportunity to be able to see them, evaluate them, make them feel like they got a fair chance to be able to show what they could do to be able to be a part of the group that's going to play during games?
Yeah, the one big thing about me, I've always been a kind of a player's coach. And for me, I want what's best for not just myself, but for the team. So I have weekly meetings with everybody, and I tell you exactly where you are. And sometimes about it, like you may not like it, but you got to respect the truth, So it's going to be some tough conversations this season. But the one thing about it, that I got our roster is 18. I can honestly say I got 18 guys that's like, they can play. Like, these guys can play. Like we had a staff meeting tonight, and we certain things we guys got to see how it unfolds, and how it is. People get hurt, things happen, but hopefully no one has nothing crazy, season-ending injury. But like, it kind of takes this. It kind of, the season it kind of just happens. Things just happen, and you just got to be ready for it. I've yet to have a season where all the guys that I started with ended with those guys, So things gonna happen, I know when I took this job, I had 21, but then when we got to our first game, I had 14 guys. So, a couple guys quit, couple guys had season-ending injuries, so, but the unique thing I don't think I have anybody that's going to quit though. I think I got 10 returners who are like, okay, we got something to prove. And I got 8 new guys that's like, all right, we're going to get this place in the right direction. So I think it could be some beautiful stuff. We can, mix it and get it meshed together. So.
All right. Final 2-part question. Part 1, we'll be looking back. So what are you most proud of what you've accomplished so far? And then number 2, what's a goal that you have for the program over the next 2 or 3 years that you're pointing towards? So what are you happy with that you've accomplished so far? And then 2, what do you hope to accomplish over the next 2 or 3 years?
The one thing that I am super excited and glad is the culture, where the culture is. We're in a spot now where we got guys that want to get in the gym and get up shots, and guys that want to get better. One thing about these high academic schools, they some people say this just, people just want to go there just for the academics. But I can honestly say that we have a culture now that we got guys who want the academics, and we got people that want to be really good at basketball. We have both now. So I think that's something that I'm very proud of. And what's the second part? Did you?
Second part is looking forward over the next 2 or 3 years. What's a goal that you haven't got there yet, but that you feel confident you're going to get to?
I think with the guys we have and the athletes that we have now, and it may not happen this year, it may not happen next year, but we're going to be top 10 in defensive field goal percentage, and we're going to be top 10 in the country in rebound margin. That's kind of been ingrained within me. That's how I'm wired. Coach K at CNU's like that. Coach Palumbo at Guilford's like that. We're going to get there. We're going to get there, and that's something that we're going to. I will say this right now. I know we will be a lot better defensively next year and year 2. It's not saying a whole lot, but year 2 we'll be a lot better defensively, which I'm excited about because that's how I'm wired. So we got guys who are bought in on that side of the ball, and it's gonna be fun.
It's a process of molding the team into the image that you want, right? When you recruit a roster, it looks different than when you inherit a roster. And so to be able to bring in guys that fit what you want to do. And obviously the longer they're around you in practice, in games, just as a personality, guys get to see what's important to you, and that starts to shape it in the direction that you want it to go. So I will not be surprised if those goals are all met this year. And clearly, I think you have RIT headed in the right direction. Before we get out, Dom, I want to give you a chance to share how people can get in touch with you, find out more about your programs, share social media, email, website, whatever you feel comfortable with. And after you do that, I will jump back in and wrap things up.
Yeah, so I think it's called X now, which used to be Twitter. So my name, my hashtag is Coach Dom P. Same with Instagram. Also, too, my email is dopatl@rit.edu. And one thing about it, I'm a student of the game. I got some stuff lined up with the coach from Trinity. I'm trying to learn from him. They won a national title, and he has one of the best defenses in the country every year. A representative from Auburn, their offensive coordinator. I'm gonna talk to him as well. So I'm a student of the game, so I'm always willing to learn and piggyback off others. So, like I said, I loved it. I love basketball. I love the process. So just looking forward to connecting with whoever.
You can always learn. Right before we did the interview with you, we had Ross Vanderloo on, who's a high school coach in Iowa, and he just retired at the end of this past season, and he was down in Chile working with the USA basketball 3-on-3 FIBA team. And he was just talking about, here's a guy who just retired. And he was telling me about all the different things that he learned from coaching 3-on-3. And he's like, man, I wish I would have known this about the angle of the screen and just all these different things. And here's a guy who's retiring and he's still learning the game of basketball. And I told him, I said, I feel exactly the same way. Like I look at everything that I've learned, Dom, over the last, 7 years doing this podcast, and then the amount of knowledge that's been poured into me by guys like yourself that are in the profession day in and day out that I've learned from. I think if there's no other lesson that somebody takes from what you and I talked about tonight, man, just that willingness to continue to learn. There's so many avenues for learning, whether it's the internet, whether it's mentors, whether it's just picking up the phone and talking to somebody, whether it's clinics. There's just a million ways for you to grow and learn. Listen to podcasts. And I think if we leave people with nothing else, clearly look to learn. If you're a young coach, keep learning. You can never, the more you know, the more you realize that you still have to learn. And then again, I wish you nothing but the best of success at RIT. I know you're going to get that thing turned around. And this year I'll be excited to follow what you're doing and see where you're at with the progress that you've made toward the goals that you talked about. And it's going to be exciting to watch your progress. So kudos to you on a good first year, building towards an even better second year. And to everyone out there, thanks for listening. And we will catch you on our next episode. Thanks. Your first impression is everything when applying for a new coaching job. A professional coaching portfolio is the tool that highlights your coaching achievements and philosophies, and most of all, helps separate you and your abilities from the other applicants. The Coaching Portfolio Guide is an instructional membership-based website that helps you develop a personalized portfolio. Each section of the Portfolio Guide provides detailed instructions on how to organize your portfolio in a professional manner. The guide also provides sample documents for each section of your portfolio that you can copy, modify, and add to your personal portfolio. As a Hoopheads Pod listener, you can get your Coaching Portfolio Guide for just $25. Visit coachingportfolioguide.com/hoopheads to learn more.
Thanks for listening to the Hoopheads podcast, presented by Head Start Basketball.